Okay, everyone, we're back. Okay, we sorted it out. Basically, what happened is if you have the two tabs open, it spins the lag and audio and it goes shit. So anyway, Graham, I was introducing you, so thank you very much for coming down here. Basically, I wanted Graham's talk to come directly after Jackie's because I am a big believer, and this comes from me from my film directing and theatre days, that if you're going to create a piece of work, you need to understand what's gone before you, understand the historical context, that kind of thing. So if you're doing, before you pick up a camera and make a movie, understand screen studies. So understand mise en scène, understand the editors, understand the past of the artistic endeavors before you start shooting your own films. And so I brought Graham in because it appears avatars and rituals and things like that is part of humans, and it goes back thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. So Graham, I'm going to pass this over to yourself, and I'm looking forward to what you're going to be saying. I'm really excited. So Graham, over to you.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Graham Shackell. I have over 20 years performing arts experience. I work in various specialisms, if you like. Pertinent to this chat, I've trained in commedia dell'arte in Italy with Antonio Fava, which is a medieval masked form of theatre coming from Italy, and also in Japanese no theatre with Sensei Akira Matsui, Professor Richard Emmett, and Dr. Ashley Thorpe for the UK no training project. As Mark said, I'm also an archaeologist, professional archaeologist. I'm currently in Dorset excavating a 6th century Saxon cemetery. So these things may seem slightly removed from each other, but actually they're not. They're very much related. People have always performed, and archaeology is looking at the material remains of the past. People have always performed, so why not look at the archaeology of performance? And in terms of research, that's what my specialism is, with side interest and specialism in mask. So tonight, wherever we are, what time it is, I'm going to give you a very brief tour of what we know about masks and some of my own personal theories about masks and how that relates to performance, where they come from, what they mean, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to give you that little tour now. I'm just going to start my presentation now. And if you do have any questions, then please just put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So the performance mask, metamorphosis, full body synthesis, and cultural semiology. So I've put these words up there. They're kind of key words for me in understanding mask and what mask means. We can go through them in more detail as we go through this presentation. The image that you can see there is of myself doing some practical performance analysis on a composite mask, which is based around the Star Car mask, which is a Mesolithic mask from Yorkshire in the UK. And we learned a lot doing that project. So you can make replicas of masks, but unless you have the understanding to do practical performance analysis, you're not really going to understand what it's like to wear one, how it works, how it moves, what it looks like, and so on and so forth. So that's what that was. So going back into a brief history of masks, as Mark said, masks have been around for thousands of years. Here is possibly the first evidence that we have of a mask, or potential evidence of a mask. So this is, on the left, you have a montage photograph of the Paleolithic sorcerer, as he's known, from Les Trois Frères, apologies for my terrible French, cave, which is in France. And this is around about 13,000 years BC. On the right, you have the Abbé Bruel's interpretation of his drawing of this carving painting. It should be pointed out that when he did this drawing, it was several decades before the photograph on the left. So at that time that the image was much clearer. So on one on the left, you can't really see the antlers, but apparently, according to him, you could see them at the time he did the drawing. So it is interpreted as a human being inside what we would call a costume and a mask. It's a composite animal. It's got a horse's tail, lion's paws, and then probably a red deer, stag, antlers, and face. I'm going to argue that calling it a costume and mask is possibly incorrect, and that we should just call it the whole thing a mask. I'm going to get onto that in a bit more detail as we go through this presentation. So 13,000 years BC, one of the earliest evidences of mask use. If we were to include the use of ochre, for example, which would be used for face painting or body painting, then we can stretch that back to hundreds of thousands of years ago. There is a suggestion that there was an artistic explosion about 60,000 years ago, which is when Homo sapiens first kind of entered Eurasia. I'm going to say that's a bit debatable, because we know for a fact that Neanderthals had art, and possibly even Homo erectus sometime before that. Anyway, if we move on, this is a star-car antler, or frontlet as they're called as well. I would argue these are masks, as do other researchers. So this is round about 9,000 years BC from the Starcar Mesolithic site in Yorkshire. Starcar is a very atypical site. It's Mesolithic sites tend to have very few remains. They're very difficult to find and quantify. Starcar has a lot of remains. It has a lot of bone, has a lot of antler, particularly relating to cervids, red deer, moose, etc. And there are a lot of frontlets there. And in general, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that Starcar was a place of ritual, or as I would probably describe it, performance. You can see from this image that this is basically a red deer skull with antlers attached, and it has been modified to quite a large degree. So it has also, what you can't see from this image is that the inside of this skull has been smoothed over. All the sharp protruding bits of the skull have been smoothed or taken out completely. And this is to enable you to wear it as a mask. I can testify personally that it still hurts when you wear this mask. You need a considerable amount of padding to be able to wear it. The antlers have been truncated and hollowed, and that is probably to do with weight reduction, more specifically the location of weight. Weight itself for masks is not so much of a problem. There are masks that weigh approximately 25 kilos, but it's about where the weight is situated. And on a antlers, that's going to be about 45 degrees behind you. It's going to extend some distance, so it's going to put you off in a horrible situation if you're the performer wearing that mask. Moving on, so these guys, this is 3 masks from a group of 16 masks from the Levant. They date roughly, they date from the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, which is roughly 9,000 years ago or 7,000 years BC from the Levant. 2 of these masks, 2 of the 16, were found again with significant amounts of other ritual paraphernalia or performance paraphernalia, and they were found in an archaeological context, i.e. we know exactly where they came from. We can date their context. So we've got good dating for these type of masks, and we know that they are to do with performance. Why am I stressing to do performance so much? When I say that I'm investigating or researching masks, specifically I'm talking about performance masks. There is an argument that these masks could be used to adorn walls or pillows or even dead bodies. So there's a big difference between masks that are used in such decorative ways than masks that are used specifically for performance. We're going to come on to that. The reason I believe, along with the principal researchers who research these masks, that these masks are performance masks is for a number of reasons. You can see on these pictures here that that there are several attachment points. From especially the center one, you can see there is 6 attachment points, and it's probably using a kind of net method of attaching. Also, the interpupillary distance. So basically the distance between where the pupils would be situated kind of gives you an indication that these would fit to the average interpupillary distance for a human being. Therefore, it's quite likely that they are performance masks. Okay, moving on a little bit further, quite a bit further now. So going to Japan, 3rd and 2nd century, 2 wooden masks, or a fragment of wooden masks, is the case on the image on the right. There are some problems with these being used as performance masks. The image on the left has no attachment holes. The one on the right, the attachment hole is significantly lower than the eye than I would expect it to be used as attachment. Both of them lack the concavity required for mask. However, that's not to say that they aren't performance masks, because they could be attached to a super that would provide both of those things. Okay, so that's a brief history of some of the masks from our archaeological past. What I want to talk about now is what is mask, what is a mask, and what is masking. So coming up to the 20th century here, carnival mask from Venice. There is a big difference, as I said, between performance mask and decorative mask. Carnival kind of falls in between. If you imagine there's a spectrum, on one end there's performance mask, and on the other end there's decorative mask, which can adorn walls or pillows or posts or whatever. Carnival, I think for some people, it is a transformative mask. You know, when they wear a mask, they become somebody else, they embody somebody else, or a different character, different personality. And for some people, it's obscurification, it's a disguise. Particularly in the past, wearing a mask at carnival enabled you to get up to all kinds of shenanigans without anyone knowing who you were, or at least in theory, without anyone knowing who you were. Maybe they did know who you were, but everyone pretended that they didn't, and that's how the shenanigans were able to carry on. So carnival, for me, is somewhere in between, and it can move along that spectrum in many different ways. What makes the difference between a performance mask and a mask for obscurification or just frivolity, if you like, is that a performance mask has to work in collusion with the performer. So the two will inform each other. And what I mean by this is the performer has to create a physical synthesis with the mask. If that doesn't happen, if the physicality of the performer does not match that mask, one of two things will happen. Either there will be a jarring, so the mask and the physicality of the performer do not match, so the audience is thrown out of the performance, if you like. They don't believe it. They suspend their disbelief of the performance. Or you could argue, the mask will fail to animate. Okay, and if it doesn't animate, it remains a dead object. It cannot project emotion. Now, it's incredible that a mask can project emotion anyway. Particularly if you talk about neutral masks, which are created to have no emotion, and the emotion can only therefore come from the physicality of the performer. And you have this wonderful thing happen where the performer, through their physicality, through their performance, projects emotions and so forth towards the audience, and the audience then projects them back onto the mask. So the mask can actually be physically seen to change. Even masks that are created with a visible emotion, that really is only one emotion. So if a mask is created to show anger, it's only anger is possible. Except when working in collusion with the physical performer, it can show a whole variety of emotions. And this is what I mean by a performance mask. If the mask doesn't animate, it remains dead, at least dormant. Before I go any further into that kind of thing, I just wanted to approach an understanding, a theoretical understanding of mask using popular media. I just realised I'm not going to see this in the chat because I've got this on full screen, but let's do it anyway. You guys can enjoy it. I'm assuming that there's going to be some Pokemon fans out there. Okay? So if you're a Pokemon fan, I'm going to ask you to put in the chat what your favourite Pokemon is. Okay? And then we can just all have a look and see who likes what. And the reason I'm asking you this is that when I get asked, occasionally as I do, who my favourite Pokemon is, I usually receive somewhat shocked answers when I describe who it is. Okay, so I can't see anyone's Pokemons, unfortunately, because I haven't got the chat switched on. So I'm just going to show you who mine is, and then I'm going to explain why. So when people ask me, who's your favourite Pokemon, I say Kubo. Now, there are Pokemon much more powerful, much more exciting, and so on and so forth, but for me, Kubo is the best Pokemon, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Why? Because Kubo, if anyone doesn't understand, doesn't know Pokemon, Kubo is wearing the skull of his dead mother. Okay. And he's grieving. After a long period of grieving, Kubo overcomes his grief, and he evolves, as Pokemon do, into Marowak. Okay? So part of this evolution, or we can call it transformation or metamorphosis, includes the skull of Kubo, which is really the skull of his dead mother, evolving into his own head. So effectively what's happening is Kubo is wearing a mask. And in the process of him wearing that mask, he's undergoing a transformation or a metamorphosis into Marowak. And at the same time, the mask is also transforming. So the performer and the mask are effecting a transformation upon each other. For me, that is a beautiful metaphor of mask. So, when is a mask not a mask? So here are some three examples. The picture on the right is the same one. It's just shown halfway through cleaning and at final end of cleaning. Three examples of masks that are not performance masks. It's very difficult to tell this. There are various ways. But the picture on the left is a large protective mask attached to the gable of an assembly house from Papua New Guinea. The picture in the middle is a mask that adorns war canoes. It's a protective mask, again from Papua New Guinea. And the picture on the right is an archaeological mask, which was dug up, literally dug up in Israel. It's from the 1st, 2nd century AD, made of bronze, very heavy, 5 kilos, and is unlikely to have been used as a performance mask. Clearly, there's no apertures for eyes, there's no apertures for attachment either. So these masks, although they might look like performance masks, they're not. Difficult to tell. There are some masks which are also decorative masks and also performance masks. So on the left here you have an Iroquois maize straw mask. This was used in fertility dances and also adorned the outside of doors when there's a feast going on inside the building, and it would be up there for protection. The Shishi lion dog mask from Japan on the right is from the Kamakura period, which is roughly the 11th century. And again, this is used to adorn the walls of a temple. It's also used in Buddhist ceremonies. This one is an unusual one as well, because if you were investigating this mask, I had the great fortune to actually analyze this mask on the right. And it would seem that the interpupillary distance doesn't work for a human face. However, we're very lucky with Japanese masks because there is a lot of documentation and a lot of masks, in fact, that have survived. And because of that, we know that this mask forms part of a two-person mask. And the mask itself, or the headpiece of the mask, is actually held in front of the face, and the performer looks through the nostrils. Okay, so This, or these, are Halloween masks from America, mid-century America, 19th century. 20th century. The reason I put these in is, apart from the fact that I just think they're incredible imagery, this is showing a group ensemble of masks. So each mask is entirely individual, and I think, for me, when I look at Halloween masks today, I don't find them at all scary. I find these terrifying. And I think the reason for that is that they are imperfect. They have been made by an individual. Each mask here is individually crafted, and it represents the culture of both the individual and the wider society. This is really important for me. When you're considering how masks are made, they are imbued with culture, both of the individual and, as I say, the wider society. So, but here you have a group ensemble of masks. They work together as a group, and yet each one is individual. Notice the setting is very important here as well. If you change the setting on this, and this goes for all of these Halloween slides that I'm going to show you, the setting is as important as the rest of the imagery, if you like. Without this, the setting doesn't enable the mask to animate, then you also have another problem, as much as the physicality of the performers. Here's another one. So again, this terrifies me. And these are masks, and they're individually crafted, and the setting is perfect for them. The final one, I mean, this is probably the most terrifying of all, and the setting is vital. So that kind of individuality of mask creation, that culture that is being summed up within that mask generation, is super important. And there's another example here of a Halloween mask. This is from County Wicklow in Ireland. Again, I'm very fortunate to examine both of these masks and analyze them. And as you can see in the picture on the right, that tells you something about the source material that was made. So it's from a sackcloth that would have been held wheat. So this is from Rwanda, and that is very much summed up in the generation of the mask. Again, I've had great fortune to analyze this mask. This mask is from Nagata Shrine in Japan. I was very fortunate to go and do a research trip to Japan, and this was one of the masks that I looked at. This is another example of cultural kind of significance, semiology within mask. So this is an oni, which can be translated as something like a demon or an ogre. But this oni in particular, with its pantheon of oni, there's 7 of them in all, they work as part of a Buddhist ceremony to rid the temple and its surrounds from evil spirits. So it's actually, you could say, it was a good oni, or an oni that does good work at least. And here are some of these oni from the Nagata Shrine in action. So you can see, I mean, these masks are 400 or 500 years old, and yet these guys are running around with katanas and flaming torches. And when I looked at some of these masks, I could see that there were, in fact, damage caused by this. The picture on the right is interesting for me because this shows the performers on the morning of the ceremony, burn ceremony, which is the first day of spring. And they undergo a purification rite. And part of that is swimming in the sea together like this. They get by the Buddhists as well. Okay, so staying with Japanese mask, but this is a kind of crossover because this is a mask made by his name's Herbert Jones. Herbert Jones was the jockey that unfortunately was riding the king's horse that hit Emily Wilde and Davison. And this was a English no play that was created to commemorate that occasion. For me, this is one of the most incredible and beautiful masks I've ever seen. The detail is insane. But before I actually analysed this mask, I saw it in performance. And what you can see before you is nothing compared to how impressive it was when it was working in conjunction with its performer, who was called John Ogilvie. And the synthesis that they created together was out of this world. This mask is capable of great animation when used by a performer who understands it. Okay, so another form of mask now. This is topeng. This is from Java. This is interesting because when I was talking before about mask representing culture, or culture being imbued within mask, topeng is very interesting for that, because topeng deals with with Hindu stories, although Java is now predominantly Muslim. But what's happened is the Muslim faith has been subsumed within the topeng masks. So you can see here the 4 cardinal points, except the cardinal point on the chin is not shown, very rarely is. So on both cheeks and the third eye on the forehead have been marked on this mask, and that is a Muslim trait. Even though this character is displaying or is involved in Hindi stories, it has absorbed the current culture, the current society or religious faith of its culture at that particular time. So there is a lot going on within these masks. The gold teeth is also quite representative of a certain type of Javanese mask, a topeng mask. Okay, so this is a Dogon mask from Mali. When we talk about culture being imbued in masks, it's very important to also bring in cosmology. Dogon have a very advanced cosmology, and this mask is very good example of that. This is called a Siriji mask, and it embodies multiple facets of Dogon cosmology. It's a multi-storied house housing ancestral altars, the pantheon of galaxies, the mythical journey of Ogo from heaven to earth, and the descent of Normo's Ark, amongst others. So there is a lot going on in this mask. I mean, also it's worth pointing out these masks are they are attached through what's called a bite grip. So that performer is holding that mask by biting onto a stick. There is no attachment around the back of the head. And the dance itself that this mask is performed with involves the sweeping of the tip of this mask down to the ground. It's very easy to catch the ground, and if you do, then there's going to be some serious injuries going on. This is a very, very impressive mask, as far as I'm concerned. I'll come on to the Dogon a bit later as well, because there is some more interesting things to go on with them. So, as it says here, this is a Yupik Inua mask from Alaska. This is another cosmological example, because it shows the spirit of the seal. This mask represents the spirit of the seal, and it shows it in its dual aspect of human and animal. So if you see on the right side, there is a representation of a seal, and then on the left side is the seal spirit in human form. Epa masks. These are, when I was talking earlier about masks weighing up to 25 kilos, these are these masks. Part of the point of these masks is to make strong young men. It's young men that wear them, that dance with them, perform with them. They are extremely heavy and very detailed. There is a lot of cultural and cosmological information in here, harking back to a historical and mythical past for the Yoruba peoples. They're used in fertility and warrior rites. And like I say, part of the purpose is to build strong young men. Which brings into play, what is the purpose of mask? Is it just for performance, or can we say that there are other things going on? Staying in Africa, so this is a Bois and Wantante mask. And again, these are held by a bike grip and a handle. At the bottom on the picture on the right, you can see the handle. And this is a good example of when I was talking before about full body mask as opposed to costume and mask. So if you analyze the mask on the right without seeing the picture on the left, you might have a very different idea about what kind of costume, if you like, the performer wearing this mask would wear. And then if you see the picture on the left, I certainly didn't imagine it to look like that. And it gives it a whole different meaning. So I'll come on to this now actually. So this is another dogon mask. This is a Kananga mask. Again, has a lot of cosmological symbolism. So it represents the spirit of the stork. It represents the god of creation, Amma, and the structure of the universe. Okay, in the shape of the two arms, one pointing to heaven and the other to the earth. The rotating movement executed during the Kananga dance symbolizes the vibration of matter during Amma's dance of creation, rotating towards the four cardinal points. The Kananga also represents the water insect securing the mythical Nomu's ark to the earth after the ark descended from heaven, bearing the ancestors of all living things. The chances of you getting that just from looking at that mask, I would say cosmology, all of that cultural significance is all embedded within that mask. There are, I'm sure, a lot of parallels between mask and avatars that you guys could draw out. I'm going to leave you to draw those parallels and conclusions yourself. But I think there's a lot of significance within how we create something. It's not just created in a void, it's created within a maelstrom of culture. So to understand why mask requires full body mask and physical synthesis, and I'm going to argue that why we should talk about mask as a whole, as a full body mask, with this being the headpiece of a full body mask. And we need to compare this mask here, this Kananga mask, which is hanging on a wall in a museum in America. And in this state, it's dead, it's dormant. And then if I show you this next slide, you can see the Kananga mask in action. So now it's a performance mask. Here, it is dead or dormant. Here, it is in animation. Now, it's a really interesting point here about the dogon. Consider, if you ask a dogon person what is mask, they will probably point to the colored fibers that they're wearing, because that is the name for them, which is emi, is actually the name for mask, as well as those fibers. So the headpiece is literally the headpiece. What we would call a mask is the headpiece of the full body mask. If, for the dogon, if you are not wearing the fibers, you are not masking. You are not wearing a mask. The headpiece only describes the character. The fibers describe the fact that you're wearing a mask. And here's another example of full body mask and cultural significance and cosmology. So this is a shaman mask from the Evenk people. And yeah, it's pretty replete. I mean, there are over 70 metal objects attached to this full body mask. And it all has to work together. It all has to be cohesive. both with the physical synthesis of the performer and as a mask, a full body mask in itself. So here's another example of full body mask. So this is a No performance, the ghost of Kumasaka, and he's wearing a variant of the Bishimi mask, which is could describe as a demonic mask. Usually you can tell that with No mask because of if they have gold pupils, it usually indicates they've been possessed or they are in the throes of great emotion, been possessed by emotion, if you like. So the thing about No as well as other like Topping and other mask forms, is that we start to get into something that I would describe as form. Or if any of you have done martial arts, you could say kata as well, would be the correct name, which we could describe as form or choreography. In this case, I would say form. So in No performance, everything is prescribed. So if you see this picture, the way the performer is standing, even down to their tiny little finger, everything is prescribed. This is not an accident. This is not improvised by the performer. It's not devised by the performer. It is prescribed form. I can't really describe it any more than that. Well, I could, but we'd be here for hours. But again, this is a full mask, a full body mask. So the headgear, the kimonos, and there is probably about 5 there, because when you perform No, you wear many kimonos to make yourself bigger, more predominant. And so again, full body mask. Here's another example. So this is a modern day commedia dell'arte from my own company. So 2 Zani characters, which are servants. The one on the right is what we'd call Capo Zani or Boss Zani. So he's in charge of some of the other Zanis. So again, you have an example of mask, full body mask. I would argue costume is full body mask, and physical synthesis. These pictures are quite good for that. They really, I think, adequately describe those characters. In commedia, you use stock characters or archetypal characters, and that physicality is a very good example of that. If you don't match the physical synthesis with the mask will fail to animate. So commedia dell'arte, again, this is a kind of idealized version of commedia, drawn, I think it was engraved actually. And this shows not only the physicality of commedia, but the vulgarity of it as well. Okay, so towards the end now. So this is kind of a slight kind of summing up of one of my major theories about mask. It's called the mask collection, and as you can see, all of these constituents all inform and reflect each other. So social cosmological function, we discussed that particularly with the Dogon. The performance function, performance function is different from the role, because, for example, if we take the example of commedia, so 2 characters are Zani. They would both have their individual. Commedia, you can just that term Zani or servant. So that would be their role. Their function in commedia, the role of or the function of a Zani is basically they act like the glue. They are the glue of the performance. Without Zani, it's impossible to have commedia. They keep everything else going. They are the oil between the wheels of all the other characters. So the mask form is physical form. The source materials is very important. A lot of ritual masks are created from materials that have cosmological, cultural significance and are treated in such a way. Ritual plays a huge part in the creation of masks and also in the preparation to wear masks for many cultures and many traditions, we know. And the craft method, again, would also play into that. So all of these things all inform and reflect each other in the creation of masks. Performance mask as an agent of metamorphosis and obscurification or disguise. Mask should be considered as the headpiece of what is in actuality mask. Mask requires full body synthesis, mask and performer generating and reflecting the character of each other in order to achieve effective animation of the mask. And mask can also act as a symbolic map, a landscape, a mnemonic landscape of culture relating to laws, norms, and values of a society within a tangible materiality deriving from the otherwise ethereal realm of performance. What I mean by that last bit is, in archaeological terms, in archaeology, we look at material remaining. Performance is ethereal, doesn't have ethereal remains, or very few. You might find a space, you might find a preparation room, you might find a craft making workshop to make set or props, or you might find a mask. But essentially, it's very difficult to find the energy of performance. References, if anyone wants to do some more reading, there are some references. And I think I'm going to close this down now and see.
Are you there, Graham? It was just dropping out towards the end, but yes, you got through everything, so we can hear you, but I can't see you, but that's fine. So can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Cool. I've got some questions in the chat, and I'm going to put them to you. So just let me do that. But thank you very much. A round of applause in the chat for Graham. And I was watching the chat, and literally it was blowing up. People's brains were just exploding with how you started to represent what masks actually were through all the historical periods and things. And so I am going to start with a question from Jackie, who was our other speaker, and she says, if a mask is just in a museum and is like in a glass case and it's not connected to the person or the culture or anything like that, is it like saying that the avatar is dead? It's not being seen because it really needs to connect with other things. It's away from something. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I personally don't really like museums that have glass cases. There have been some quite good studies on glass cabinets within museums. There is a movement within museums and archaeology generally to try and take artifacts out of the glass cabinets, because if you can't touch an object, you're failing to kind of interact with it, I think. And for me, as researching masks, I need to look at the back. I need to look at it from all different angles. There is something very tactile about these kind of material objects. Obviously, there are good reasons to have objects inside glass cases, because touching them damages them unless you've got latex gloves on and so on. Light damages them and so on and so forth. But yes, I think for me, I don't particularly enjoy museums unless I'm going into the back rooms to look at stuff with the gloves on. It's a totally different experience for me doing that.
Well, I can see a good segue.
I think they are.
Sorry, I can see a good segue here into the digital realm of the masks. So if you've got we've got a digital worlds and our digital avatars, you could place the masks of, say, the Dogon culture onto a digital avatar, and you could demonstrate how they use it, and people can actually put that mask on and act out and do the performances like a living museum, but do it digitally. That's an interesting concept. Brings that mask back to life without having to touch it.
Yeah, the physical synthesis of mask and performer, I think, is very. I think is absolutely crucial, and I think it would be difficult to replicate.
And what was interesting about showing us cosmology, which I as soon as I heard the word, I didn't understand it. I'd not heard that really before. But when you showed it as a mask that almost showed an entire history, what I saw from a digital perspective was like a hard drive, and that hard drive can be accessed through the performance of the person embodying the mask, and then the mask is their whole body, and then there's this huge timeline of your Facebook timeline, but done digitally or something, and that being performed so that everyone can see the history of the culture.
Yeah, that's a really, really good metaphor, actually. Yeah, I really like that. I mean, I think for me, I always think about there's a tribal group in Australia called the Arunta, and they do a thing with dream time. They don't actually use, well, they do use masks, but not in this case. But when they talk about a mnemonic landscape, when a young boy becomes a man, they go on an initiation ceremony. They're taken on a walk by a tribal elder, and in each place they stop in significant cultural, cosmological places, and in each place they're told a story of the ancestor that is related to that place. And what's significant about this is because it takes place in dream time, not only are they being told a story, they are also witnessing it, because time for them is not linear, so it folds in space and time. So they are actually there at the same time as hearing it, and the elder is embodying this spirit. So mask, it could work in a similar kind of way to that, like you're saying. You know, you can use it to tap into a culture's history or cosmology or culture.
God, I've got to wrap it up in a minute, but like I think we can segue into something off the back of what you just said there. Paige has got who's going to be speaking next as part of a panel. She says, how do you see performance and masquerade and social media and AR filters in relationship to each other? So we've got a context of historical archaeology, and there's Venetian masks, and then you've got Generation Z putting Snapchat filters on their face and making them either beautiful or ugly or things exploding out their faces. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, they're all masks of a form. None of them is created within a cultural void or vacuum. So if you're putting bunny ears or cat's whiskers on you, that is coming from the culture that surrounds you and that you're part of. So if you came from a culture where, I don't know, maybe bunny ears was offensive, then you might not put that on there. If you came from a culture where having cat's whiskers is considered cute or attractive in some way, or it would describe something about your personality or your individual character, then this is why your culture is informing these actions. The mask that you're creating, a temporal mask that you're creating.
I mean, and that's fascinating. As you were saying that, I was thinking about the Disneyfication of Halloween. So those images that you showed, a lot of the chat found quite shocking and macabre, because actually that is Halloween. It's kind of evil, sackcloth. I mean, everyone was saying that that's how they're now going to wear masks and go to the supermarket. It's like we're going to put a sackcloth on and a rip through the mouth to see or whatever. But what you've got there is, as you just said then about the reflection of culture creates the masks. We are almost living in almost a safe bubble of beautification, because that's all our masks are, or just a very shallow placement on ourselves. Whereas even 50 years ago, those masks that we were seeing at Halloween were grotesque and had a sense of the impending evil of the time and a warning about something. There was a story there, but now there isn't a story. What does that say about society?
Well, you can also relate this to cosmetic surgery as well, because then you're effectively creating a mask of your face, which is, perfect, let's say, perfect, and at the same time is unable to correctly express emotion because of the way that it's being crafted and so on. So again, that you could argue that would be a mask, and by creating that mask, although you may not be able to project emotion in a way that we would normally understand and be able to receive those kind of communicational signals, you are in effect projecting something else, which is relating to the culture that you've come from, where everyone's supposed to be perfect and so on and so forth.
Brilliant. We're almost out of time, but I want to say a massive thank you. And do you have any final points or musings that you want to add at the end?
No, I'm just going to go back through the chat and see what I've missed because I couldn't see it while it was on.
And on that, are you going to be hanging around for the whole thing so people can chat to you and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm going to have. I'm eating, so I'm going at some point, but I'm definitely on.
Cool. You just, your signal's just dropping out, which is great because it's right at the end. So,
okay.
To everyone in the chat and Graham, thank you very much, and I'll see you around, and we'll talk after. So I'll see you soon.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone.